You're doing it something, you're not on my feed finder or whatever that site is, are you?
I used to have a Friendster account.
What's that?
Friendster.
Friendster?
Just a way to find friends online before MySpace.
Oh. I'm too old for that.
For MySpace?
Yeah.
Or Friendster?
Both. I did AOL. Messenger.
Yeah, I have it too.
I don't have that anymore. Or you would be in chats about random things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We could have a chat about real estate. Chat room.
Yeah.
They still have chat rooms.
I don't know.
We could do a chat room about escrow.
Oh, that would be good because people want to know about escrow.
What do they want to know? Like, are there just specific questions that they want to know at this point?
I think there's things that once you get into the business, like I've been in 20 years, and what is the difference between, I have all these titles.
Mm-hmm.
You have escrow officer,
yeah.
Title officer, is that the same thing?
It's not the same thing.
So, what are all the titles that you have in your office? And what's your title?
My title is escrow officer.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So escrow officer is my title.
Okay.
There's a lot of titles in the industry. Escrow officer, escrow assistant. A lot of times you have funders and processors and title officers and title assistants. You have customer service reps. You have front desk people who have all different kinds of titles. You have couriers, admin staff, HR. I mean, the list goes on.
Okay, so let's go to escrow officer and title officer. What's the big difference between those two?
So we're going to pretend that whoever's listening to this has seen a title commitment.
Okay, we'll pretend.
Okay.
If you haven't, we can certainly find for you.
Sure. Yeah. So the title report is produced when the property is searched, and I'm speaking very generically at this point. The individuals that put that title commitment together are on the title department side.
Okay.
So the title officer is the person that helps put together the title commitment.
And that shows all the liens.
Everything that's being recorded.
Recorded against the property. So an easement or a loan or
CCNR
or a judgment. You have bad stuff happen.
Judgments are not necessarily recorded against properties; they're recorded against the people's names.
But they also show up on those. Yeah. So and sometimes I have John Smith when there's a million of them up there, so I have to we get social security numbers to clear that. Usually
just the last four socials, the social and middle name, and sometimes date of birth.
Okay, just a little more information. So it's only bad luck if you've had a John Smith who's murdered 100 people with a similar social security number, similar birthday.
Yeah, that could be bad luck.
Yeah.
For a lot of different people.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But as a realtor, you probably don't want to be privy to the information that is needed, so it's probably better that escrow, because title won't reach out because they do the back end stuff. They're happy to chat with people about certain things, but typically during the process, it shifts over to escrow, and they're the ones that are calling the people to help clear those things that are showing on the commitment. So John Smith, we would want to reach out to the client directly to obtain social, date of birth, and middle name information, just so realtors are not the ones that are having. We don't want that information. You don't want it. And we'll never ask you for it. So if a realtor asks you for it, double check. Yes. Because we shouldn't be asking for it. Especially when you have a very gung-ho real estate agent, maybe they're a little bit newer and they might want to do that for the escrow officer, but usually if you get that information requested, it's probably a bad guy. Bad guys. Bad guys. Yeah. But bad girls. There can be bad people. What you gonna do when they come for you? How are you gonna change bad boys? It's bad boys. Yeah. Right. Cops. Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, that's title, that's escrow. Okay. Certainly different things. So title is just looking at the title report and pulling the information there. So they really have nothing else to do with the transaction. They're in the background. There's a lot more that they do, but for the purpose of explaining what an escrow does, that's what you would find is they are the order gets opened, it goes in their queue, they search the property, they search the people, they put together the report that goes out to all the parties. Okay. And then escrow will then go through that report and help clear it. So what that means is with the taxes that are on there, with the assessments for city, irrigation, HOA, things like that, we'll be reaching out to those different parties to make sure that things are either paid or at closing, or if they've already been paid, everything's prorated accordingly for that as well. Okay, so are there bills you don't like to run through escrow? Like if during the transaction, we sometimes have repairs and I like to run them through escrow so everybody knows they've been paid. But are there sometimes they don't want them run through escrow. So what would I do then?
If it affects the property, I think it's better that it gets paid through closing for that, because then we as the title company can show that it's been paid. So we're not worried about them coming back and leaving the property.
That a bad check got written or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we know that it's paid.
Especially a bigger bill.
Yeah.
So like a $30 bill, probably not as big of a deal, but a roof replacement.
$15,000 replacement.
Yeah.
Things like that. It's usually best just to run through that. So we're cutting the check. We can actually have them sign lien waivers on that as well, so they know that they've been paid and they cannot lien the property anymore because they've been paid for the work that they've been done.
Okay. I think that's valuable information for everybody to know. What about utilities? Do you pay all the utilities?
Not all of them. So a lot of city utilities are not run through closing. Some are. Sewer, trash, for the most part, those are taken care of through there. Sometimes you have sewer here and trash here, so both of those are taken care of as well. Power is not, gas is not. Those are just services to the property. They're not actually lienable items at that point.
Are there any utilities where you actually take care of changing the property ownership name so that the consumer doesn't have to contact that one?
We notify the entities that the transaction has taken place, but there's probably information that the clients can go in and take care of. We always say over contact whoever you need to. So if you're with the city of Boise and you have the services as a seller, it says, I need you to make sure that these are canceled. What is it, the day of or the day after, at least for closing? And then it's the buyer's responsibility as well to contact them to get those set up. But when we're reaching out to the city, we let them know when the closing date is and who the buyer and seller are. So we're, we're doing that, but I always recommend having that extra phone call to go so they make sure that it's actually completed.
Okay.
And if there's any information that those utility companies need, it's best that they can provide that information to them direct.
Okay. I had a client recently and they didn't want to cancel the utilities because they thought that, and maybe this doesn't really have to do with title and escrow, but maybe just your opinion. So they didn't want to cancel like power because they didn't want the person to have no power.
Sure.
So they wanted to leave it in their name until it transferred over. But the buyer was sort of slow about transferring it, so they were frustrated. So what do you think is a fair timeline for a seller to leave the utilities in their name? Like a week after closing?
I think if everything is done correctly, usually when you call to cancel a utility, they're not going to go out there and turn it off right away. There's usually a time frame in there, and a lot of times it's 2 or 3 days. I don't, let's just pretend that they close on a Monday, power's then transferred. They're not going to turn it off. But if they cancel and nobody calls to bring that back in, I don't know how quickly they're going to do that. But in the ideal world, the buyer will be calling before closing and saying, hey, as of Monday, I'm going to be the new owner. Can you make sure it gets transferred into my name at that point?
Yeah.
So I would always say just to over communicate on those things.
And usually we've told them a couple of times, so I feel like they've gotten enough notice.
And if the power does get turned off and they just completely forgot to do it, then
okay.
There you go.
So escrow assistant, they bring you your coffee, pick up your dry cleaning?
No, because I don't wear nice enough clothes that need dry cleaning. And I hardly drink coffee. So the answer is no.
So you have an assistant and she just waits for you to say something, or does she have a job? Or he?
They do have particular roles that they take care of. So
I understand I can't use pronouns anymore.
Okay. So
Because I mess it up all the time.
well, I mean, there are he's and there are she's that are both doing the role. So an escrow assistant can be broken down into a few different kind of roles at that point. So let's start with the clearing or processing assistant. Some have those. So what that is they'll take a look at the title commitment and make sure that the city assessments, payoffs, everything is being taken care of.
Okay.
Like we're finding out the information that we need to for those. We're asking for commissions. We're asking for if buyers and sellers are in town. We're asking what their marital status is. Just different things to make sure that when the file is prepared, that everything is checked off the list.
Because you could buy a house as a married person without having your spouse on the title.
Yes and no. I mean, on title, yes. You can come into it as
But the other spouse has to acknowledge it.
well, sometimes. So if it's a cash buyer,
Okay.
and a man is buying it just by himself, but he doesn't want to have his wife on title, then he can take it as a married man. If he wants to take it as a married man as a sole and separate property, she would have to sign a quitclaim deed before it closes. But with a cash transaction, he can electronically sign and wire the funds, and he doesn't have to come in. So if he doesn't want to do that, she doesn't want to come in to sign, he can take it without her on there. Her interest would then need to be handled before they either took out a loan or sold the property, which means she has to acknowledge that he owns a property by himself in a state that's a community property state. So she would have to acknowledge that they own that property together,
Or
even though she's on the title.
Yeah.
But normally, when you have a loan, then the non-borrowing spouse, so the individual that's on the note, still needs to sign the deed of trust that gets recorded, and oftentimes needs to sign the quitclaim deed, removing her community interest from the property in order for him to be on the property by himself.
And that's mostly because of the loan, right?
A lot, even like she's not on the loan.
So
Whether she doesn't qualify or they don't need her to qualify for the loan itself, and he's just on there, she doesn't have to be on that. Now, she can be not on the loan, but on title if the lender is okay with it. So
that's up to the lender.
very circumstantial. That's correct.
Yeah, I've had a couple of transactions where that particular piece has caused a lot of stress, right? And closing because the wife wants to be on loan or the husband, right? Like, what are you doing buying property without me? And it gives a sense of security.
Yeah, it's a secret thing. It's not like you can put a bow on a house and buy a house without the spouse knowing it.
Wouldn't that be fun? I mean, if you have enough money even to do that.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't even understand how the whole car thing works. If my wife showed up and I had a car in my driveway, I'd be like, what are you doing?
I've done that before, actually.
Did it work?
Yeah, I have done it a couple of times. My husband is not a big fan of me going to the car dealership because I usually come home with a new car.
Yeah. Do you take your own bow, or is that something that they
It's a gift to me. I don't ever wrap my own presents. I actually try to hide it in the garage and see if he doesn't notice. How long it takes him to notice? It's like new clothes.
Yeah. How long is
He's
it?
quite observant, unfortunately.
Yeah. Bummer.
Yeah.
Pay attention.
You know, one of their wives are always complaining about their husbands not paying attention. You don't want them to.
Okay. It's good.
Because then they notice everything.
You can't get away with anything.
You can't get away with anything. When'd you buy that? Last month.
Mm-hmm.
I've only worn it today for the first time. What?
We take notes. So you have your processing assistant. You also have a lot of funders that are assistants, which means at the very end, when everything is done, everything's signed, everything's notarized, they're working with the money part. So the money's coming in, they're applying the money to the file, they are cutting checks when everything closes, getting them delivered out, sent out, mailed out, whatever that is. So there's people that work with the end of the transaction, escrow assistants that are more in the funding role.
What's the safest way to have your money? Like, is it safer to wire? Is it safer to write a check? Is it safer to have Wells Fargo show up with a cash truck?
So with the cash trucks, they're armored, so it usually doesn't help out if they're just bringing in sacks of money. And you can't go out there and get it yourself because they have to bring it in. But if you have a buyer that is in the outreaches of somewhere that can get to a bank to get their funds over, to title, I would imagine that a wire, people are worried about wire fraud.
Right.
The process of actually wiring the money is safe. It's the process of sending over the wire instructions, which is the part that's the scary part.
Okay.
The fraudulent part.
So, what are some safeguards somebody can do
for wire fraud
Yeah,
prevention?
Yes.
Yeah. So, best thing to do is to make sure that there's no middle person with the wire instructions. So if I'm working on a transaction with you who has a buyer that wants to wire their funds to us, I don't want to send the wire instructions to you for you to then send them here for them to then send the money.
So they should call you directly and get the phone number from the agent, maybe not from an email.
No, don't look it up from an email or the actual instructions because that's just how they get you.
Yeah.
So the best part is just to confirm those. If you can pick those up and want to print it in the office, we can print those for you. And then when it comes to needing them,
Okay.
using that. But yeah, I would always say overcall. Pick up the phone and just make sure that those instructions are correct.
I've heard nightmare stories about wire fraud.
Yeah, it's scary. I mean, and it's not going away. They're just finding different ways to try to do that. What will happen is people will get instructions to say, you need to send this now, we're getting ready to close. They freak out and they're like, okay, well, I better get ready to do that. And then they just use the instructions that are listed on that.
Have you seen a wire fraud attempted? And what was the largest amount of money?
For me personally, it was probably around 400.
400,000.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard of bigger numbers?
Yeah, it's all over the place. So it's just a matter of just making sure that you call and verify those instructions and keeping as many people out of it as possible.
I had a title escrow officer tell me, I'm going to get it right now. I was never getting it right before it. They had been talking to the client on the phone and they were going to pick up a check and they got wire instructions. I changed my mind. And he called her right back because it literally came while they were on the phone together.
Okay.
He goes, she's like, no, I'm picking a check up.
Yeah. I had it happen. This was years ago, so kind of early on. On the form, it shows, how do you want to get your money? And it said pick up. And then I get an email that says we actually like it wired. And it was the same form, but you looked at the signature line on it, and you know how it has just lines like this. It had their signatures, but it looked like somebody had taken a screenshot of their signatures and pulled it on top of this, so the line was broken at the bottom. And then calling the actual seller and says, hey, so just want to verify, it looks like you want your funds wired. And they said, no, we just want to pick that check up. So, and then what happens at that point? If you have people that are trying to commit fraud, it's like you send it into, I don't know if it's the state level FBI, but it's like out of all the attempts that are out there, there's no way for them to keep up. There are times when funds are wired to the wrong account that they can be
Unwired.
Well, they can't be unwired, but they can be found. And a lot of times, nothing can be found. There are many instances where money, whether it's a high percentage or the whole thing, does end up.
And it usually is if you find out within a short amount of time, like 24 hours or less.
The faster you can find out definitely helps out.
So pay attention.
Or just don't hire. Get a check. I mean, there's a lot of people that just are scared of it. They just don't want to do it. They'd rather go to their local bank, spend the time to drive there, and then bring the check in.
But I was sitting at a title office. I was teaching, and I went to the front desk, and the gal had a stack of cashier's checks at the front desk, and she was calling every single bank to make sure that the cashier's check had actually been written on that bank.
You can verify those funds as well.
So it was amazing. Like, I thought cashier's checks were like super safe, and apparently they're not.
No,
I mean, maybe they're safe.
Yeah, they are safe. It's just verifying to make sure that the check isn't fraudulent as well.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so any other titles in there? What's a marketing person do?
Well, there's also the escrow system that essentially works directly with the escrow officer, and they are sometimes do the clearing, sometimes do the funding, but they're really there to help with emails and phone calls and just day-to-day, making sure we have everything ready for closing.
Okay, and then you are the one that goes into the room.
A lot of assistants do as well.
Okay,
Yep.
and they're as friendly as you are.
Sure. Yeah. In general,
I've had title or escrow officers be very serious, and I've had them be fun.
yeah. Which is preferred.
For me, it's fun. For me, the escrow is the very last touch in the transaction, right? It's the person at the door taking your money. If you're in a restaurant, it's the cashier, saying, and it's important that you leave that room feeling good about what you just did.
Are they going to remember anything that they read or signed or whatever?
No, but they'll remember how they felt.
Yeah.
And so if you can have somebody that really makes them feel like they made a good purchase or they did a good job,
or eased their tension or answered their questions. And it's interesting because there's a lot of stuff as we're going through the signing, they'll ask questions about things that we may not have information on at that point. So it's hopefully there's representation, realtor, if there's a law officer that's part of it too. It's nice. And when
I think sometimes we've gotten out of the habit of coming because of COVID and then life, but it is good when you
It's
show up.
it's nice to have the table full of people.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like closing. It's fun when I come. I haven't been in a while because I teach a lot too, so I sometimes am not there. But
I was just saying last year we had to do 3.
I wasn't there
No.
because I think I was teaching.
But it's important to find someone that if you can't make it, you trust the person that's in the room with your client.
Which is right, yeah. So you and I, and then the buyer usually gets to pick who that person is, the buyer's agent. But there are listing agents that have preferred. Builders will often have their preferred agencies because they have to file all their documents with the title company, right?
And oftentimes it's just easier because everything's there. They know the process. Maybe they have 6 that they're signing on one day, so
They can come in and sign.
just have it all done at the same time.
And then sometimes estates, somebody will set up a title. Does that matter?
Not really. I mean, if you're dealing with like an estate of a deceased individual.
Or anything, I often, and I don't know if it's an intimidation factor, but in the agent notes in the MLS, it'll say title has already been opened with Alec at Venture.
Well,
But
all
like-
the notes should probably say that, but they
But it hasn't. Because we just listed it.
could be. Yeah, or, maybe it's been open, but then it canceled because the buyer couldn't get the funds, or something canceled because of the inspection, and then you can say, yeah, it hasn't been open because at that point,
It has.
been open.
Has been open.
Then you get seller prefers, or you get, how it works. And it depends on the market too. When we were dealing with the COVID times, it was like, it was like, if you can get your contract in as a buyer's representation, it's like, I don't care who we close with. Let's just close with whoever you want to so we can get the contract because there's 19 other contracts ready, you're competing with, right?
Yeah.
But if there's 17 buyers and one property, one buyer per whatever, they're like, we prefer to use who we want to. And the seller who's had the house on the market for 120 days is probably like, okay.
Okay, let's just go. Yeah, let's go.
But there's also like foreclosures. We're not really in the day of foreclosures, but when we were, those foreclosure companies would have preferred who they've closed with because all the information, they know the process, it's all there. They're not really reinventing a wheel with some people.
And relocations are the same way. They have their preferred people.
Yeah, so there's really no rule behind it.
There is a rule about paying though. If you want the seller to pay, the seller can choose. That's what I've heard.
You have to be careful with the rules and the word typically in standard these days.
Yeah.
But most of the time, we are seeing that the seller is paying for the standard title insurance. Now, if you go to Chipotle and you want the guacamole, even though you have a coupon for a free burrito, they're going to make you, as the buyer of the burrito, pay for that additional guacamole.
Right.
But they'll still cover the cost of that. So anything additional, like a lender's policy and additional title coverage, is typically on the buyer.
So usually on a contract when I'm writing it, the seller pays for the initial title commitment because they're the ones saying, we have a house and it's free and clear of any debt. That's how I explain it. And then the lender is going to want a policy on it because they want to make sure they're in first position. And there's that extended policy. What is that?
So it's extended or expanded or Alta homeowners. There's all sorts of different coverages on there. But a lot of times the buyer will elect to get the additional title coverage because it just covers that much more.
And what would it I don't know, I say typically,
No.
but what is a range of things that it would cover?
I think there's
What is different between?
there's 33 things additional to what those with the additional title
It's almost
coverage
like
cover versus you go for 2 extra days at that point. Do you know why Baskin Robbins has 31?
No, but
Because if you went for ice cream every single day in the long month, you would never have the same flavor in that month.
that's the only reason.
Well, I mean, they have more than 31 flavors, but that's why they originally started with, not originally, but that's why they have the 31 flavors, is because you can go.
Every day and have a different flavor.
Mhm.
I don't know anybody that has a different flavor every day.
I mean, maybe they're giving you
Most of us go and get our same
a coupon to try them out. If they did that, if they said, come in every day and you don't have to have a different flavor every time, but it's free,
like a punch card with each flavor.
Yeah.
Then
but
I'm
it's
okay.
free, you say yes.
Well, yeah.
Mhm.
Well, no, because there's some I just don't want.
Like what?
Raisins, no raisins. I don't really
Raisins?
like. Yeah, like isn't there a rum raisin ice cream?
Maybe.
And I don't like nuts in
So,
the ice cream. I don't mind the marshmallows.
It sounds like you have a problem with ice cream flavors that start with the letter R.
Maybe. Maybe.
Do you remember on City Slickers? You ever see City Slickers?
City slippers? Yeah.
So the two guys that are supposed to probably be like Ben and Jerry are there, and they're the brothers that run the ice cream company. And they're saying, here's what we've had for dinner. What flavor of ice cream would go well?
Like carrying wine.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's the one where the guy's really struggling to try and figure out, and he says, rum raisin. And then they say, woof. And they said, how do you know it's right? So anyway.
Yeah, so raisin. What about you? What's your favorite ice cream? Like if you were going to the store and somebody was guaranteed, it would be like, yes, thank you, I like this one.
I like vanilla, I like chocolate, I like Neapolitan, I like cookie dough, I like Rocky Road, mint, peppermint,
Okay,
a lot.
a lot.
Yeah.
Peppermint a lot, or just
No,
all,
just all
all
ice
ice
cream,
cream?
a lot.
Ice cream is good. Depends on the flavor.
It happens that just they
I got it. Somebody's happy with me.
That's good.
Yeah, I didn't screw up something. It's been kind of a weekend.
Can you first put confetti on this?
Yeah, we have Melinda put confetti on. Yeah.
Sales reps. So, I mean, there's so much that people do outside of their role or trying to explain what a role is. It's just like you don't want to miss anything. But the sales rep or a marketing individual, their role is to go meet with new clients to see about them using the services of the company. You go out and you see existing clients and make service calls and just see how they're doing.
And they get paid based on whether I bring business to you.
Typically, yeah.
So if you're going to waste their time with lunch and then not use them, that's kind of bad form.
That's not fair, right? But then you can't buy their, I mean, yeah, their idea is to get clients to use the title that they work for.
Right. So if you're going
In ways that are legit and legal and fall within the regulations of the department.
and they're not always allowed to take you to lunch or do those things because of the way you put it.
So I just gotta be careful with that. And a lot of it's the amount as well. So what's interesting is you can't, like your office, title companies can't bring in food to your office, but we can take you to lunch.
Oh.
We can't give you something of value over $10. There's different ways, and they're like, okay, well, we're not going to pay for you to go on a trip, so that way we can get your
Dang it.
business.
I was kind of hoping for a short of wine.
No, the easiest way to do it is you're leaving the office, we'll just put our foot out, and then you'll trip over that.
Oh,
That's the trip that we can provide.
that's the only trip.
But we're really not out to hurt people either, so I don't know if we should do that.
Maybe we had.
Mhm.
It's okay.
Yeah,
My family would probably pay you if you did that. Tripped me on the way out.
that's reverse, so I think we could do that. I think we can take money for
You
that.
can take money, but you can't give it.
Yeah.
Okay, then we're fine.
What else? Customer service. Those are individuals usually part of the title department that will, when realtors or lenders will request information on a property, that's the information that's being put together and then sent out.
So like a listing package. Okay.
Those.
Oh,
Courier.
yes.
If
They don't
they're,
go
if they're
get
going fast, they're called scurriers.
Oh,
Just made that up last week and nobody laughed at it.
that is kind of fun.
A scurrier. Yeah. So
Hey, have a hop on. Sorry.
a lot of couriers will take original documents, go pick up original documents. They'll deliver checks or go pick up checks. It's really just the way of getting things to where they need to go or picking things up and getting them back.
I know they go from real estate office to the escrow office to maybe a mortgage company, like they'll do that kind of scurrying.
Mhm.
Do they scurry to people's homes? So if I had a client that couldn't get out and they wanted to write a check for their earnest money and I was teaching and I couldn't get there.
I'm going to speak for the industry in general.
Okay,
It's not ideal, but yes.
it's not.
You got to be careful when you're sending people to private residences.
Yeah,
But
scary.
Yeah.
Trust me, I go to private residents all the time. You think
Right.
of safety, that would be a really good one.
Mhm.
I know we could call for that.
Okay.
Ghostbusters. Just kidding. We're not very funny today.
That was good. I thought you were going to come up with a really good answer. I'm like, who would you call to talk about safety? And
Oh, I have a couple of agents that
Okay.
teach safety, so I think we could
so it's going to be one of those things like where we are being attacked and we have to
maybe.
fight our way out of it.
I have to bribe him with the person I'm thinking of with drinks, and he drinks a lot.
Oh.
I mean, not a lot, but it would be high-end stuff, so it'll be expensive.
Really early, we get woken up by our daughter who says, "There's something downstairs. It's scary. Like there's a noise coming from downstairs." And here I'm thinking, "Okay, what?" And she says, "There's a toy, I think, that's downstairs that's making noise." So we had our nephew over yesterday, and we keep all these toys underneath the TV downstairs. And one of them was, like batteries or dying in the toy. Like anyway, it was Bop It. You ever play Bop It? And we're like, Bop It, twist it, and it was that thing with the batteries running out. And I said,
So it sounded like
so it did sound like something was going on downstairs.
I was showing a house once, and there was something that talked back to us as we were walking through the house, like a toy or something, and it did freak us out that somebody was in the house hiding in the closet.
Okay.
It is scary to go. Like, I think that is something the public doesn't understand about real estate is, and then there is a trend that you would go look at a house with 3 other agents and you're casing it, and then you call me and pretend you've never seen it before.
Mhm.
Like you've cased it, so you know where all the likely quiet spots are, and then you can do whatever it is.
Mm.
Not you, but the perpetrator.
So when people ask me, like, how would you describe what escrow is? What's interesting is somebody gets a loan and they have an escrow account. Taxes, insurance, sometimes mortgage insurance is part of that.
Right.
That's like the middleman of the lender and the entities that need to be paid.
Right.
Whereas we are in escrow, we're the middleman for all parties involved in the transaction.
And you're supposed to be neutral.
Mm-hmm. Supposed to be?
Well, usually.
Are there some that aren't?
I don't know.
What does it mean to not be neutral? Playing favorites?
Yes.
Well, you can't really do that with fees, right? Because fees are disclosed and we are supposed to follow the Department of Insurance's regulations on fees.
Yeah.
So I can play sides, pick my favorite. I haven't done that yet.
No, I had one tech company. I signed with the person at the front desk, and they did nothing about paperwork
Mhm.
because they had overbooked themselves.
Yeah.
So that was frustrating.
Mm-hmm. That can be
I
hard.
felt like I was not being favorited that day because I got sort of stuck with somebody that didn't know what they were doing.
That can be tough.
Yeah.
You know how I would approach that is and usually it's not double booking. It's like, hey, the only time that they can come in because something changed that they have to be at right now, can they come in at this time? And be like, well, we already have a full house. If they don't mind just coming in to sign with somebody and they don't have any questions, but it wasn't like that.
Yeah.
So,
No, I have had that before, and that totally is fine because it's all disclosed up front. It was you're going to schedule with whomever,
Yeah.
and you show up, and they're like, yeah, they're
I didn't know that I could just let anybody do my signing. I should start doing that.
no.
Yeah, I can't.
That's not who I like you. That's not who I trust you. If I can't make it to a signing.
I'm just going to let the scurrier do it.
No,
They can drive around in the car while they sign it.
I feel like Ratatouille. Like,
Having someone else do it.
yeah,
So they were a team because the rat couldn't do everything that the person could.
I know, but I think as long as it's communicated, that's right.
Sure. That's fair.
As long as I know, because there are some clients where no, I need a part. I've picked that person for a particular reason, and then there's some that they don't like care. Like they would sign with a robot.
Is it coming?
Probably.
Maybe.
Yeah, I
You
just
said maybe, probably. It is doing a lot. But there is something that AI cannot do.
sign my name. Well, no, I could probably do that.
You just said it like a robot. Sign my name.
They can. I mean, a robot. My daughter has learned my signature.
Okay. But so robot probably could.
Yeah, I came home the other day and there was my signature on a piece of paper. It was practiced, and she left it out. Like my kids sometimes.
Want to be caught.
Right. And I took a picture and I sent it to her and I said, "What are you doing?"
Mm-hmm.
And she goes, "Well, I needed a form signed."
Yeah.
My foreign exchange student.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, none of those look like my signature. She goes, "Well, the one that I did sign for her did."
Did. Oh, those were just the
I'm
practice
like,
ones.
that's called forgery and it's illegal.
Yeah.
She was like, "Oh." They teach it in school though. I tell my classes all the time because when my daughter
They
and son,
teach you how to forge things?
yes, because in my kids, think about this. In third grade, second, third grade, your kids have homework.
Mhm.
And you have to sign off that they did the homework.
Yeah.
But I was busy and my husband was traveling, so there were days where the homework didn't get signed off. Well, what happens at school when they don't have a signature from their parent?
They get in trouble.
Or
I think
they
it's zero.
miss recess.
In this recess, or they don't get to go on a field trip because
Right.
the permission slips on the side.
What's the most important part about school when you're in third grade?
The recess.
Recess.
Yep.
So they learned really fast to sign my
Mhm.
initials, to the fact that if they needed a signature for something else, they usually signed it
So
because
were they actually doing the homework though?
they weren't doing
That's
homework,
fair. Right?
but then they signed off on it.
Yeah.
And so the school's teaching them that early on because some of
Would
us are
you,
busy.
would you have read through the homework to make sure it was done, or just looked at it to make sure it was done?
I usually knew that they did it.
So you just sign it anyway. So they're saving you time. They're making
I
you
don't think
more
the school
efficient.
would have looked at it that way.
So I don't know if whoever puts this together can find the episode of The Simpsons, or at least a picture of it when Homer had signed something and his principal was saying that doesn't look like his signature, and held it up on the check that he had written, and it was the exact same signature.
Because his handwriting was so bad.
Mhm.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
all have it. Yeah.
Mhm.
That's why it's good to have a good. Someone the other day had a really nice signature, and they actually had to sign their full name
Mhm.
at a closing. I was at the they had to sign something, and she was like, "Let me see your signature first," before she told them how to sign it,
Yeah.
because it was so neat and pretty. You could read every single letter.
Yeah.
He got penalized because he had to write more because he could read every letter.
Difficult. I always say make it as big scribbled mess if you don't want to have to sign everything. But you want to make sure you're following the rules of if there's a loan on there, the lender usually wants to see, if it's 4 names, wants to see all 4 of those names as part of the signature because you're signing as that name.
Yeah.
But if it's like, you're like, can you tell me that your middle names were part of that signature? And they say yes, you just get to move on from it. It's difficult. It takes probably the longest time on a document, just telling people how they need to sign
I
it.
had an escrow officer tell me once that it wasn't my signature and I had to sign it a different way. I was like, that is my, look at my driver's license, that's my signature, but I had to sign it
And that's the hard part.
like I was in third grade learning
Mhm.
penmanship.
Yeah, that is the hard part, because if it comes back under review of certain lenders, they're like, no, that's not the name that's on the line. It's like, but if you match it up with the driver's license, that isn't how they sign their name.
Yeah,
It's a tricky thing.
that is tricky.
When you're wiring funds, don't put an extra 0.
No, that would be bad.
Mhm.
Yeah. And don't use a robot.
Robots are bad.
Yeah, AI is bad. That is, we could talk about AI one day.
We can. AI, when you're texting it to somebody, it looks like my name, Al. So I don't know if they said Al did it or AI did it. So
Oh.
I'm really struggling with that
Yeah.
right now.
Maybe they have to spell the whole name out when we're talking about you.
Or just say artificial intelligence when they're talking about AI. Why should I have to change my stuff?
That is true.
It's like on Office Space, and we'll leave these people with this. Did you ever see Office Space?
Yes and no.
That guy's name was Michael Bolton, right? And he was born before Michael Bolton, the singer, started winning Grammys. Why should he have to change his name because Michael Bolton became famous?
Because, yeah,
It's fair, right?
that is
Why
fair.
is Michael Bolton more important than this tech guy, Michael Bolton?
I don't know. Because he's famous for singing or playing a saxophone. He did something. Did he play with?
I thought that Michael Bolton was a saxophone guy with the hair, and he's up there.
He's got the hair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Careless Whisper.
That's George Michael.
And that's the saxophone guy, isn't it?
No, Michael Bolton is somebody else.
I know that, but who's the saxophone guy that plays? I think
I
Careless Whisper was the song that the guy with the saxophone was playing. I think that's what we're thinking of.
No, Careless Whisper is a song by George Michael.
Right. I think he was the saxophone guy,
George Michael?
not Michael Bolton.
No, George Michael was the one that was with Lady Clam.
We'll find that out. We'll ask AI to figure that out.
We'll have Melinda put the right answer on the
That's fair. Done.
perfect.
Okay.
George Michael is Wham. Michael Bolton, saxophone guy.
But what song was the?
I can't remember. Well, I think Michael Bolton also sang maybe,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't Careless Whisper. We'll put his famous song on there.
Mm-hmm.
We'll look it up. We'll put the famous song and then George Michael is Careless Whisper.
Yeah.
With, yeah. Wham. I had a record with Wham. This is how old I am. I had a picture. a LP, and it had George, Michael, and Andrew, whatever the other guy's name was. Their faces on their LP was kind of clear, but their faces on each side had a different pose.
Side A and side
I
B.
think my mom got rid of it, which made me mad. Of all the records she got rid of, I was the most upset about that one.
Maybe she didn't really, maybe she's kept it for herself.
Maybe she sleeps with it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Like your iPad.
I don't think so. I sleep with my iPad, but I don't think she sleeps with George Michael. She was not into the 80s music.
You did a good job last 10 minutes of actually turning this to an awkward conversation.
I'm excellent at awkward conversations.